Okay. We should be live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week of Feature Group Friday. We'll give things a minute to get started here. I'll check in on my audio, make sure everything's working as usual. And then the plan for today is going to follow our usual trajectory. We'll start off with some development updates, go through everything that's been happening behind the scenes over the last week or so, and then we will transition into the canny board, which you can see on my screen right now. Go through anything that's been submitted between last week and now, and then we'll finish up with a feature building session that I'm not going to spoil just yet, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And just make sure that everything is, oh, bitrate is in the dumps. Let's see what I can do about that. To my one viewer, can you hear anything right now? I'm assuming that's Grant. Mostly just worried about the recording. I don't want this to be a super choppy. I was messing with some settings for recording. I was hoping they weren't going to have anything to do with the stream, but maybe it bled over. Let's see. All right, I just changed something. We'll see if it does anything or not. Audio is fine, doesn't look choppy either. Huh. It's saying I'm unstable. Average stream bitrate too high. So I just cut my bitrate down by a lot, but it yeah, like if I'm moving, like, is it super like choppy when I do that, or? I thought 2000 was a number that could be handled just fine, but I don't know, it's still unhappy with me. It's not saying I'm dropping any frames, so I'm just going to assume it's fine until told otherwise, but keep me in the loop on that. I realized yesterday I was working on some social media stuff for the TikTok account, and I was trying to take some recordings of my own monitor, and I was just noticing it was super choppy every time I tried to record, even though when I was watching I wasn't having any problems. And I found out that the entire time I've been streaming and recording, my OBS Studios, the open source thing I use, has been trying to encode everything using the CPU and just completely ignoring my GPU. And for those who don't know what that means, the GPU is basically made for doing that, and the CPU is not. And so I was trying to force all this information through my main CPU, and that's why I was having a lot of issues, and the recording was super blurry, and there's a whole mess. It's just because I'd set it up wrong however many years ago when I got this all going. So we're using the GPU now. Hopefully that means things will be okay. My recording quality way up. I don't know if the stream quality will be any better, but yeah, that's my personal update. So let's get started now with some development updates, things that have happened since last week. And just to remind myself, a week ago from today was the 26th of September. So like I mentioned last time, we are sort of in the final stages of the next release, which is good because we're almost done, but it does mean that the updates are a little bit less exciting because it's mostly reviewing and making sure that the fine details are all worked out. But let's go through what happened, starting with a branch that may or may not make this next release. I'm hoping it will, but it's a bit complicated, even though it's a really minor change on the front end. We are separating the profile page to kind of segment what information is presented where. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, if I pull up the profile page right now, we currently have a bunch of different information displayed at the same time. You've got your name and your rank details, you've got your flare stuff, you've got your rolling 300 stats, you've got your all-time stats, and then you've got all your settings going on down below that. And these things are all good things to have, but they're not all necessarily your profile, and they're not all necessarily related information. So what we're going to be doing is separating this out into a few tabs so that you can come to somebody's profile and you can see, okay, this is Cheese Doodle, this is their account age, this is their skill score and all that. But then we're going to separate out like your flares and make those on a different tab so that if you wanted to have all the customizable stuff that we're going to be adding in its own little world, that can be there. And then settings on its own as well. Because right now there's a settings button up here that nobody knows about that if you're not logged in will still work, but it's just the same thing as the profile. There's no real distinction between the two. So separating the three of those out just helps us kind of keep track of what we're actually doing on each page, and then gives us some more space to add more features in, because we are planning a lot of changes to a lot of the stuff that you see on my screen right now. So it'll be good to have a home for each of those things. So that branch, again, might make the release, might not make the release, but it's ready for review now. When does testing begin? Testing will begin as soon as everything is reviewed and merged in. I'm hoping that will be this week. Well, I guess it's Friday. Within the next week, I'm thinking we have 3 branches that need to be merged in. I'll get to those as we go here. Basically, once everything is merged in, we're ready. So it's going to be a day-by-day thing. When we're done, we'll let you guys know. If you have not opted in to the future group testing role in the official server, please do that. You'll get a ping when we plan our first testing session, and we will hopefully get a release out soon after that. But so yeah, profile tab stuff ready for review. A branch that I mentioned last week, I've just been continuing to work on that. It's related to redirecting at the end of games, and this ended up being more complicated than I was hoping it would be. The basics of it is that there's a file that runs when you're in a game, and when a game ends, it just decides where it's going to send you to. So maybe you want to go to the home page, maybe you're going back to the joiner to join another game. Is it the ranked joiner? Is it the casual joiner? Are you in a group and you're going to go back to your group after that game? So just kind of all of that stuff. And the problem is, before, in the current code on production right now, there's no real standardization. There's like 4 different functions that all try to do the same thing, but they're all triggered by different events. And so it's taking all of those, putting them together, and making it work consistently every time. And that got a little complicated because there are just so many places you can be and so many places you might want to be going that it's a bit of a pain to keep track of all of that. So I'll try not to lecture too much on this one, but like if you're in a casual game and you are queued only for casual, when your game ends, you want to go back to the casual joiner. But if you're in a casual game and also queued for ranked, you're supposed to go back to the ranked joiner. If you're in a ranked game, you go to the ranked joiner. If you have that last game selected that we've talked about a few times, you don't go to any joiner, you go back to the home page. If you're in a group, you go back to the group page, no matter what the game mode was or anything like that. Mini games go to the casual joiner. What was the other one? If you get like a certain emit from the game where the game doesn't let you in, that still is handled in that file. So if you try to join a game that you don't have access to, it should redirect you to the home page and give you an error on top of that. If you're a spectator and you join a game, but you join as the game is ending, you have to go back to the home page, but now we're adding in direct spectate, so it's not the home page. So it's just a bunch of things that need to be all handled. So it's been a little bit more effort than I was hoping it would be, but that should be ready for review now. And that should be a quick one once it is reviewed, just to test everything. We finally finished a branch I've mentioned in the past about internal consistency. It doesn't really matter for the sake of this stream, but there's something called ESLint that helps you basically enforce certain coding standards in your code to make sure that everybody who's contributing on their own time is still following the same general rules, so that it's a lot easier for bug testing and for reviewing other people's code going forward. So that's good to go, merged in finally. We have the first pass of the inactive and skill score decay checks that we've talked about on stream before. This is based off of a feature that we built about a month ago that was talking about when is a player marked inactive on the leaderboard for ranked, when do they start to lose skill score, and then eligibility requirements for ranked flares when a season ends. So all of that's kind of together. The first pass of that is done. It was waiting for a different branch to be done because they had to use part of the feature in that branch before it could be finished, but that should be done shortly. A big review came in on the skills chart. So I've talked about already this stream that we're going to have the home page broken up into those 3 different tabs. One of those tabs is going to include a little bit more detail about your ranked history. Anyone who played TPM in the past, you might remember that chart that there was on your profile. We have something similar, and in my opinion, better than that on the way. That's one that should make the release. It's not a guarantee, but I'm hoping we can get it out. But if not, it'll be ready soon after. And that's probably all I can share on that one for now. Still a little bit of testing to do there. I found a missing field in the joiner for a completely unrelated thing. I was helping 360 Broscope, one of our developers, with something unrelated. He was trying to hunt down a really specific bug related to replay downloads that we were just seeing if we could sneak in, and he couldn't get a game to launch. And so I was helping him troubleshoot this, and we found a field missing in a really buried line of code. So we just threw that directly into the production code. So that should fix a very niche bug there. More stuff with the UI of the history tab, kind of showing the games that you've played in ranked and how they went and all of that. Some easier tools on the back end for developers to test things went in. We have a big review that came in on leaderboard desyncs. That's a big one. So if you are on the leaderboard tab, say you just played a ranked game and you wanted to check back in to see how you did, there have been for a long time some inconsistency issues in the timing of when these get updated, and like if you're out of order and stuff like that. We thought we'd fix most of them, but we found a pretty major one that was still occasionally popping up. And that fix ended up being a lot more complicated than we were hoping it would be. But the review for that came in 3-4 days ago now. So basically just saying when a game ends, how does the information from that game populate to this leaderboard without disrupting the rest of it? And the details of it are kind of boring, so I'm not going to drone on about that. But it's better now, or it will be better when that release goes live. Just consistency, accuracy with the numbers. You might notice sometimes like this number doesn't match this number for some people because of that timing thing. So all that should be better. Next up, we had that review came in, merged in, done. A different thing to my other branch I was talking about with the redirecting, making sure that you couldn't get redirected to 2 places at the same time. Just scrolling through a couple of boring updates, just things being merged in. Come on, I know there's more. Oh yes, this is a big one. So right now we have been working on the spectate page, and just to show that on my screen, we've talked about this a couple times on stream, where we're making sure this page will actually do something when you click on it now, so you can see all the active games, pick the one that you want to watch. We are also going to have that be present in the joiner itself, so that instead of random spectate, you can pick what game you want to watch while you wait for your casual or your ranked game to happen. That part is in a good place. It's almost ready to go. What we were finding, and this is a pretty common problem for updating the client, is that if you have all of these games and all this information about who's in the game, how the score of the game, so the time of the game, like the skill score of each player in the game, all of that information is good information that players want to be having access to when they're on this page, but it's a lot of data to keep streaming into the player. So what we were finding was if we had like 6 or 7 games running at the same time and all this information is streaming into this page, it was throwing like megabytes of data at people pretty consistently, which is just too much information to try to have back and forth with the client. It's bad practice just from a development standpoint, and it's just not good for bandwidth and things like that on our half. So just optimizing all of that to make sure that we're only sending important information when it needs to be sent to the client, and everything else just kind of keeping it as what you would expect. Like you don't need to know every second. You don't need to know that a second passed on the scoreboard. Like you know that a second passed. Like you can figure that out without sending the update from the game every time. So little things like that we've optimized, and like removing fields that we're never going to change. Like if a player's skill score was being sent every update, you don't need to know that that information was never going to change during the game that they're in. So you only need to know if it's new, and your skill score is never going to change mid-game. So stuff like that, just kind of condensing it down to now it's a very, very small amount of data being passed back and forth. Also some changes on the back end. We have a similar view for developers only that has some improvements on the way as well. So that is the majority of our updates for the last week. It looks like my bitrate calmed down, which is nice. So yeah, that's this week in review. Outside of development stuff, we just have some SteerCo developments, steering committee developments, just talking about how things are going to look. We had a lot of back and forth on how to display a game that's active, which I mentioned before, which we still haven't fully decided on how it's going to look, but we got it like way down. It was a big thing with way more information than we needed at the very start, I guess. And we kind of whittled it down to just what's relevant, making it look pretty, and allowing us to just display more games at once. Because if with this whole large thing, you could see like 2 or 3 active games at a time. You had to scroll. Now we can have like 9 games, and you can still see everything at the same time. So it's a nicer view, which is good. So that is all going, and then we finally, I keep saying this, but we actually finally finalized the flares for ranked. They're done. We're not changing them anymore. We're happy with them. So those will be out in the next release, and that might have been everything. Oh yeah, we're trying to decide what to do with the icons. If anyone has opinions on this, either live or in the replay later, on this replay page, we currently have some flares here. We're doing away with that, and we're switching over to, hello, Gendy45. It's my college roommate. We currently have flares displayed right here, which are fine, but we didn't really have a good flare for spectate because there isn't really a great flare, like maybe like the magnifying glass or like Jimmy's eye was like a thing that came up, but we're like, we should probably just not do flares. So we're going to switch over to a font awesome look for this. So we were just discussing different icons that could be used for each of these. Like there's a very obvious spectate icon, which is like the eyeball that's spectating for other whatevers. So just picking the ranked and the casual ones. So if you have any opinions on that, if you are familiar with Font Awesome, feel free to take a look and let us know. But that was the only other thing we were chatting about yesterday. So I think that is good enough for me for updates. So as always, if you have any questions about development stuff or just for me in general, feel free to shoot me a message anywhere. But if not, we are going to move on to the candy board. So I feel like we haven't been getting as many of these lately. I don't know if it's because stuff comes up on stream now and people just assume that's good enough or what, but last week we had responded to this one about curated games because it's very relevant, but I wasn't sure if we could do everything that was asked. We just had a follow-up question that I'd like to address, so let's read it from the very top here. Features being worked on. Some of this might be the plan. It would be cool to be able to spectate top ranked games as well as competitive games, and that's the important part of this. They want to be able to spectate competitive games. I'm not sure how you would integrate those into spectator mode, but if there was a live game, it would be cool if you could have different venues for streaming and stuff like that. So my response at the time, I almost closed this because I was like, I don't know if we can really do that because private games and public games, they're just so different. Like the whole point of private is that it's its own thing, and public is what we are presenting as the game developers, or whatever you want to call it, as the future group, I guess. The other problem, I didn't mention this on stream, but it came to me afterward, was that if you have different moderation standards for private and public games, if things are happening in private games and we're displaying that to the public, now it's like, do you start enforcing those public chat rules on the private game, or do you just hide the chat? I think it's a little bit awkward to have the things that we're not moderating still presented as if they were things that we were moderating. So it's not a super clean thing, but I wanted to talk about this more with the steering committee, and I have not had a chance to do that in the last week. But because we're in release mode, we got to get this release out the door. Where was I? So might require some manual upkeep, not sure. Yeah, so that's all still true. So the question was then top ranked games could still be doable, and the answer to that is absolutely. There's no reason that we can't curate top ranked games. This was something I initially had promised. Watch curated games and replays right there. we can do this, but we're really focused in this moment on getting the live spectate stuff up and running. Once that is good, we do have plans to add in replays as well, so you can watch good replays. And I'm not sure how we're going to go about doing that necessarily, but I do know that we can have selected by some standards. You could say, okay, if it's a pure tier one game, and the finishing score is, it goes to the full time, or it's within 2 caps, or it goes to overtime, like always include that at the top, and then just keep adding new games and only show the most recent 20 that meet those standards, right? Those are the games people are going to want to watch, so you can definitely organize that pretty easily. Hello, Lanikin_21, another friend of mine from college who appears to have found my stream. Anyway, so for the governor, yes, there, what's this? Curated ranked games will not be available in the initial implementation of I'm going to call it direct spectate, but will be possible in the future. I think that's good enough for me for now. Good. So I just wanted to follow up on that. Let's go to some actual new stuff now. Moving from active casual game to ranked is broken. So this is something I've been noticing. I think we fixed this, but I'm not 100% certain. So let me ban this spam bot first, and then. Okay, so right now, if you are in a ranked game, you might have noticed at some point that your countdown in the top right corner says player is in an overtime game, finding them a sub and then launching. And that was meant to be a way to allow players in casual games to finish their game if it was about to end before they got pulled out into their ranked game. And that's a longer conversation that we can have later if we need to, but several things with that approach are broken right now on production. I think they're fixed in staging in our server that's ready to go to production for the next release, but we need to wait and see if it's actually working. And so the precursor problem to this is that on stream about 3 weeks ago, we talked about how ranked game waiting times were all messed up because we were waiting for the wrong things, or we weren't waiting for players consistently, or players are being sent to games too early. We talked about the matches not being generated because we were skipping over certain combinations accidentally and all of that. So all that's been fixed on production right now. So that's all live, but in the process of fixing all of those things, I did accidentally break a different thing. And that different thing has to do with how long a game waits before it finds a substitute. And this is relevant for what's in front of me, because if you are in the expected implementation, what would happen is a ranked game launches, including a player from a casual game who's going to leave their casual and join that ranked game. And every time that casual player pops, that game is supposed to go to the joiner and say, hey, I could use a substitute right now. And if they find somebody in the 3 seconds that that player is respawning, it'll pull that player out of the joiner into the casual game and then send that player to their ranked game. And that was working really, really well before our other fixes. What happened in the process of those fixes was that we added a check that players were being sent into games too quickly. So to switch gears here, if you finished a ranked game and you went back into the joiner and there was an active game running when you got back to the joiner, there was no check for how long you had been waiting in the joiner before you got pulled into that active casual game. And so what was happening was a tier 1 game would finish, say there were 8 tier 1 players, just for an easy example, all 8 of them would go back to the joiner. Maybe one of them also had casual selected and would get pulled into the casual game, and then the 7 remaining ranked players would get sent into a ranked game about a second later with either another tier 1 player or maybe a tier 2 player who hadn't found a game yet, and they would be off and running. Then the tier 1 player who got pulled out into their casual game would arrive in the casual game, reconnect to the joiner from their casual game, and then create another ranked match with anybody else tier 1 through 4 who was just waiting in the joiner. Then they would get pulled out of the casual game into their own ranked game, and now you had 2 ranked games, some of them with tier 1 players and tier 2 players, and some of them with the rest of the tier 1 players and anybody else they could find. And this was obviously not what we wanted to happen, because now you have players jumping in and jumping out of casual. You have tier 1 players getting split up in their ranked games, and everything was just a mess. So the way that we fixed that was to enforce what we thought we were already enforcing, but enforce a 5-second wait to say you have to be in the joiner for 5 seconds before you're going to actually get pulled into that casual game. And that 5-second wait allowed that player to be considered for the ranked game at the same time as the active casual game. And so they would prioritize the ranked game and not fill in just to leave again that casual game. So that all was great. That all worked. It's live now and it's working the way it's supposed to. But in the process, that 5-second wait was also enforced on games. So you remember I mentioned a few minutes ago, if a casual game has a player who is ready for ranked and they pop, it's supposed to go to the joiner and find them a sub. And if it finds a sub in those 3 seconds, it replaces them. But I just mentioned 3 seconds is smaller than 5 seconds. So what's happening right now is the player pops, the game goes to the joiner, says, I need a substitute. The joiner says, I'll give you one as soon as you've been waiting for 5 seconds. Then 3 seconds later, that player respawns and the joiner says, nope, you don't have any more spots to fill. And so that's why you'll notice if you're playing casual and ranked right now, you're never going to get pulled out before the timer ends because it's not waiting the 5 seconds. Like the 5 seconds that it's waiting is too long a wait for the 3 seconds that you're respawning. So that's completely broken right now. And it's manifested. People see it the most in these overtime games because you're waiting for somebody to join and they just never join your game. So it's been causing some unexpected voids. This is what was happening to Jed here. He said redirecting soon and then kicked him out. And then the ranked game was never there because it kicked him out after the ranked game had already voided because it thought that he was going to be sent at some point and he never got sent. So it is a bug. It is something that we are aware of. It is something we have fixed. It's just not fixed on production. It's fixed on staging. And hopefully we can just get this darn release out the door so that it stops being broken on the production server. So that was a long-winded explanation. Sorry if I lost anybody there, but TLDL, too long didn't listen. Yes, it's broken. Yes, it will be fixed soon. So this is in progress. You're back. Why am I? Okay. So just to respond here, this is a known issue that is already patched for the upcoming release. If you are experiencing this again after the release is live, please let us know. Yeah, so annoying that that's happening right now, but we're on it. So this other one, the governor. So this is a longer one. We will read it together. This did also get posted to Reddit, and I did respond there. So we'll go through what the question is, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what the current status of it is. So from the governor, I feel like the joiner for ranked games is too picky based on individual ranks. Wait times are obviously high for some players, and once you get into a game, it kind of keeps you in a cycle with those players. But sometimes you'll see 8+ players waiting and still not get a game. You're assuming that delay is because the joiner is prioritizing players close together as opposed to people who have waited for a long time. And this is all true so far. This has led to a number of players playing casual rather than going back and forth. I think that's fair. And if the joiner prioritized wait time more, that would be better. So I'll get into this part later, but just to address this first part, yes. And this is what I was responding a little bit with in my Reddit response here. So what's happening right now is that any player who's ever played ranked has created a ranked profile, essentially. And that ranked profile is checked every morning to see how many ranked players there are and decide if we need more tiers for the number of active players that we have. And that works great if everybody who plays ranked is active. It does not work great if everybody who plays ranked stops playing at some point. And so what happened at the very, very start with the ranked release, it was a big deal, obviously, and we've talked about this on stream before. All of these new players came back, or old players came back, and a lot of new players started playing ranked as well. And you had all of these people with ranked profiles, and then about a third of them, if not maybe close to a half of them, stopped, or they only play one game a week. So they're not playing consistently enough to fill the queue up. And so if you have all those players and they're spread out from the best to the worst, there's supposed to be 8 tiers of players evenly distributed, but all the players who play a lot are on that front half, players tiers 1 through 4 for the most part, and then anybody 4 through 8 are the players who don't play very often, or they maybe don't play at all, but they're still filling up those slots so that the game still looks every morning and says, oh, I have this many players, so I need this many tiers. And that's obviously not correct, because now players in tiers 1 through 4 can log on all the time and get games pretty regularly. But if you're 5 through 8, you log on, nobody else is queued for ranked, you just never get a game, and that's obviously not good. So there is a check on the way in this next release. I can guarantee this one will be in, where it will look at the active players instead of all the players who have ever played, and decide how many tiers and how to distribute the players within those tiers based on that active player check. And so that kind of ties into what I was talking about at the start of the stream, where I said that we have finished the inactive check that we just talked about on stream. I'm losing my train of thought. So we're checking to see when players start to decay their skill score, and when they start to get removed from the leaderboard, lose their flare eligibility. Those same checks will be applied to how many players are active to decide how many tiers and how many players within each of those tiers. So basically the goal is to have all the active players spread out evenly, so that no matter what level of play you are at, you are getting games every time you queue ranked. And that doesn't mean that everyone's always going to get a game all the time. Like if you log on at 6 a.m., you're not going to get a ranked game. That's okay for the current state of the game. But when players are active, there should be games created evenly across all the tiers, not just clumped towards the top. So what he said at the top, completely correct, true. Second paragraph. My thought when ranked was first being developed, I wanted more balanced games based on an elo system. Your entire team doesn't need the same skill level, as long as the ratio is roughly the same in terms of good players and not so good players. This is how casual kind of works now, yes, but casual is not really the same thing as ranked, obviously. So this is what I kind of got stuck on here. So I'd argue if players don't want to play with others below their skill level, the competitive leagues are there just for that. And again, I did address this in my comment here, but just to talk about it a little more on stream. Yes, if players want to only play other people with the same skill level, that is what competitive is for. But that's not necessarily what ranked is doing at this time. So I talked about the distribution, that's one thing. But if you zoom out a little bit and look at all the players who do actively play ranked, and the disparity in skill from your top players, like your Junoons right now, your okay thens of the game, your Dragon Beast Stamp, take those players and put them against somebody who's in tier 5, 6, 7. There comes a point, and it's probably a higher bar than that, where those games are never going to be competitive. And that's not to say that those players aren't trying to play the game well. It's just that some players are playing at a level that is just so much higher than other players that anytime you put them in a map together, there's nothing that the three teammates of the weaker player can do to make up for the skill disparity between the top and the bottom player. And what that leads to is it's just not fun games, because you get the same player who's very weak on your team, and you know you're immediately going to lose. And that creates a couple problems. That player always loses their games, for starters, which is never great. That player might get targeted now by their teammates because they are the reason for the loss, and that's not necessarily true, because you can always play better to work around your teammates, but that's how it's perceived on the player side of things, which is not great. And then the player who is the good player, like, they're not engaged by this. It's not fun for them to just go ahead and just roll heads the entire time they're playing. Like, they want to have competitive matchup. They want the other team to be able to kind of bite back a little bit. And that's why before the ranked release, you had a lot of players at the very top, like a good chunk of the players on my screen right now, who just did not play pubs. There was no reason for them to queue, because their teammates weren't going to be a quality level that they could really tolerate. Their opponents weren't really going to be a competitive level for them. So it wasn't a fun experience for players who were this good at the game, and I am not one of these players. It wasn't fun for them. And so, yes, there is some need for them to play down to a certain level, because you need to just have games happening, but there is a cutoff where those games are going to stop being fun. And so we've been trying to fine tune where that cutoff is. What we currently landed on is tier 4. So tiers 1 through 4 can play together. Tier 5 through 8 can never play with a tier 1 player, because of everything I just said there. So it's not that you can't play with players weaker than you, it's that you can't continue to drop that floor indefinitely. There is a point in time where it stops being fun for both sides of that equation. And then the other half of this question, competitive leagues are there just for that. That's true. But if you look at the competitive leagues right now, they are way more selective than our ranked system is. So if I pull up an info hub real quick, and you look at some of these rosters, Okay, so the weakest player in majors right now, I'm just going to go by tag coin value. You got King Cruel and you've got Marcus Yallo, FT Button. If you look up any of those players on the leaderboard, let's go with Button because his name just came up. Hopefully he plays ranked at this point. It's going to be kind of annoying. Yeah, so this is a player who is the worst by objective metrics. It's not saying he's actually the worst player, but the least expensive player in majors is a player who's in tier 2-2. That's the weakest player in majors. Like, and they're not even a weak player. Like they're better than me, frankly. Like he's above me on the leaderboard, and I like to think that I'm somewhat competitive at this level. So it's like they are selective. So if you wanted to play with players only your level, that is what competitive is for. It's already doing that. So this is a completely true statement. It just doesn't change how we're approaching ranked at all. That is what that is. So if you need to play players your same level, their competitive is for that. Ranked is not for you, but ranked should still be competitive for anybody at any level. So, so just to answer the direct questions here, was ranked meant to separate competitive players from some balls and new players? Sort of. Was it meant to separate very good players from the rest of the player base? Also sort of, but directly no. It was meant to take players who want to play really disciplined TagPro, not making mistakes, focusing on every play they make, like current meta, going for power-ups, using them correctly, all that kind of stuff. 2 offense, 2 defense, pushing when you need to, just how the game is supposed to be played according to the top players. And then players who are at work and maybe need to close the tab. Maybe players who have a kid who's sitting in their lap and smacking the keyboard every once in a while. Players who have a bad internet connection that day and they're just not really feeling it. Players who are intoxicated and they don't want to focus that much in the game. Like the ranked players are the ones who are really going to be going for it, and the casual players are the ones who are not. And that can happen at any skill level. You could be a really good player or a very not good player and still want to focus on the game and try hard. That is what ranked is supposed to be for. It's not supposed to take the best players and only give them games. So that implementation is what we want. What I'm describing is what we want. What we have right now is not what we want. So we're working on it. It will be fixed soon. Thank you for your patience at this time. So hopefully that answered the question for the governor. I did respond on Reddit, like I said, and they did respond back. So hopefully everyone's good there. But sorry for dragging Button there. Button's a very good player. So I'm going to close this because it was addressed on Reddit. But yeah, that's that. So any follow-up questions on that, feel free to share. But I think I've talked about that plenty. Can I hyperlink in here? Oh, no, I don't want to touch a file. No. Okay. Good. So that's all we got for the candy board this week. So we are going to shift gears now, unless I have any questions in the chat. I don't see anybody throwing anything at me. So I had one plan for this week, and I'm going to throw it away because I have a better plan. So in the Discord last night, somebody had come up and said, it would be nice if, and I'm paraphrasing here, it'd be nice if I could play games on the same team as one of my friends when I'm trying to show them the game. And that started a small little conversation. I brought up in the past that for ranked, at least, we were loosely planning to allow duo, maybe trio, probably team queuing at some point in the future. I don't know if, when, or how we were going to do that when I said that, but I would like to at some point offer the ability to play a ranked game with players that you have chosen to play with. And I think that's a thing that's somewhat common in other competitive games as well, so it's not too hard of a sell. But this request was specifically for casual. So I figured we'd spend our time today in our feature building slot building a specification for duo, trio, team queuing for both ranked and casual, decide if they're viable, decide how we'd want that to look, and maybe try to think about some edge cases where it may or may not fall apart that we need to address ahead of time. So I'm going to pull up a document here, and we will jump into it. The thing that I had been planning to do that we're going to push off to next week, unless something else comes up that I like more, was going through all of our planned features and trying to set up a little bit more of a clearly defined roadmap. So right now we know the roadmap is to get this ranked release done, finalized, working, then shift over to the in-game shop, which we have pretty much ready to go in terms of creatives. We just have to get it actually built and working. And then after that, obviously the Steam release is the big target. So those are the big three. We're in the middle of that right now. But after that, I have some loose plans, but nothing clearly defined on what I want to be doing. So I'm thinking we can spend one of our streams in the future talking about what we're going to be working on next, how to prioritize those things, and maybe a loose timeline on top of that. But for today, we are going to talk about duo, trio, team queuing for casual and ranked. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. Okay. So, overview. Players have requested the ability to join games with their friends been requesting long before the ranked release. This was never allowed due to random matchmaking, but should be possible with our, this is more of a back-end slant on it, with our new understanding of the single world joiner. Okay, so we're going to break this down two headers, casual and ranked, and we're going to start with ranked because that's the easier one. So with ranked, any timeline for NF ranked games? Yes, timeline is season 1, which we're almost ready for. So I should clarify what I mean by that. So season 0 is currently active right now on the site. We are going to get this release out. This release is going to include everything we need to end a season and to start a new season. So we're going to get the release out, end season 0 a couple of days after that, start season 1 a day or two after that, make sure all the flares and all that worked properly. And season 1 is going to include ranked neutral flag. That is currently the plan. So we'll see how that ends up working in practice, but within a week or two, ideally, assuming things don't explode in our face. And sometimes they do, so we'll see, but soon, TM. Anyway, ranked. Where was I going with this? I'm going to start messy and then we'll clean it up later. We're saying ranked currently only allows solo queuing, no groups, no team, no preset teams, etc. So let's start with just a duo queue. This would allow players and a single partner to enter the joiner and be matched with two other players against 4 other players, whatever. This is probably going to be something that would have to wait for the friends feature to be done, just because, maybe not. I mean, it could work with groups, I guess. You would just have to play private games, play casual games, play ranked games for your 3 options. Because right now in groups you have your private games, but you can switch it to, play public games, and you can go back and forth. So this would just have to switch to play casual games, play ranked games, and then instead of play public games, which currently allows 5 people to enter, you would just have to have 2. I guess you could do 2, 3, or 4 if that's how it goes. We'll see how the spec pans out. But yeah, that would be fine. I don't think we need to wait for a friends feature to build something like this. So allow players and a single partner to match. So it would probably have to need to follow the same match quality guidelines as current ranked games. So just for those who are not aware, when you queue for ranked, there are a couple of checks. You need to make sure that all the players are within something we call a tier tolerance. And that's something I had mentioned a few minutes ago, where if you are a tier 1 player, you will only ever be considered for games with tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tier 2, only with 2, 3, 4, 3, and 4, 4 and 5, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 are all together. And so if you are outside of those bounds, you will never be considered as a tier 2 player with a tier 6 player. There will never be a game with that overlap. And that's going back to what I was just talking about with the cutoff for where does a game stop being fun for all involved parties. That's how we found those lines. And that might be tweaked in the future. But if we were doing queuing as a duo, how would we address players being in different tiers? Like, would it say you can only duo queue if you are both within that tolerance? Or would you find like the average of the two and try to make it work from there? I'm not sure what the right answer would be off the top of my head there. So feel free to drop any thoughts in the chat if you have them. I'll keep going in the meantime though, because the other thing that we need to consider is match probabilities. So after you have your tolerance check and you have all the players in the same distribution of tiers, roughly, you simulate the end of that game. So it takes the skill score, which is the ordinal, and the mu, I think, is it, or sigma, I forget, doesn't matter. You take the values that are the back end representation of skill score, you put all 8 players in together, and you say if they were to play, what would the outcome be? And it will say that there's a 50% chance that one team wins or the other. It'll say 55-45, or it'll be 60-40, or it'll say like 72-28. And if it says that, if it's outside of that 60 and 40 bound, we throw the game out. We say, okay, this game's not close enough to be considered, don't count it. So you would definitely need to enforce the 60-40 check, because you don't want to have players queued together that have like a 90% chance of winning. What's the point? Like you've decided the game already before it started. So you would need to enforce the 60-40 check, the same as open matchmaking or normal. What do you call non-duo queuing? Regular matchmaking. Grant says, I think it's got to be both eligible to play together. Bringing a tier 1 and a tier 6 together into a tier 3-4 game doesn't really make sense. Yeah, that was my knee-jerk reaction too. The only reason I'm entertaining a different viewpoint on this one is I think Rocket League does not do that. And so I'd like to look into it a little more on how they handle it. Maybe they do, the kind of way that you're describing. I'm not familiar with it too closely, but I thought that you could play with players at a pretty wide skill disparity and still get games together. But I think it's a lot easier for us here and for developers in the future if we keep it as already being eligible. So let's go with that for the initial spec at least. And it's going to obviously be edited and reviewed later. But players who queue together must be eligible for matches with one another. And that's the kind of thing that could be checked at the very, very start. Like if you say you're in your group and you're saying, I want to play ranked with my friends, it could just tell you right then and there, like you two are not eligible to play ranked together. If we could offer casual, that would be a fine alternative to give them. But I think that's good for at least a starting point for this. So that is good enough for duo. If we go straight ahead, I'm going to skip over trio because it's a little awkward. Let's just go to full team queuing, because this is going to have some different thoughts. So this would be allow a team of 4. And I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen. It's just we're going to talk about it. Allow a team of 4 to enter a joiner together and be matched against others. Now, the question here is, does others only apply to other full teams, or can it be random duo mixed players? For the 60-40, how easily is that skewed if you threw Janoon okay then together against average tier 1 opponents? How low does the rest of their team have to... Yeah, it's a good point to bring up. I don't think it would be a problem because the way that we built our tier tolerances, not tier tolerances, the way we built the 60-40 check and decided on our tier sizes was loosely related to this, with the general idea being that if you take any 8 players who are all in a single tier, there should always be the possibility of a 60-40 game with a combination of those 8 players. So that does not mean that it's always guaranteed. So we'd have to look into that. If you take the top 2 players, is there enough of an offset with the rest of them? I think the answer is yes, and I'm only saying that because I think I've actually seen games with them on the same team. Not often, but I'm pretty sure I saw the player who was in 1-1 and then the second ranked player at the top of 1-2 on the same team at one point against somebody else. So I think it's okay. We would have to look into that, but I guess the follow-up question would be, do you just not give them a match if they can't? I think the answer to that is an obvious yes. If they can't make a match, you can't make a match, right? Actually, you said how easily is that skewed? What does that mean necessarily? Because are you just saying would they just need weaker teammates? Because if that's the question, yeah, obviously you just need to give them a weaker second 2 to fill out their roster. Feel free to expand on that while I keep going here. So back to my question here. So if you have a full team queue, all 4 players have decided ahead of time they want to be in this game together. Can they be matched against random players who just happen to make a good matchup, or do they only get matched against other full teams? And the concern with full teams is that how often is that going to happen? How often are you going to have a full team of 4 that's at the same skill level enough to be matched with another team of 4? Probably not often. So if we were going to do full teams, it would probably have to be random, mixed, or duo players against them. You would still do the match probabilities and tier tolerances, but I think the tier tolerances can be a little bit different because now you're saying you have 4 players, and this is really like a nice thing to work towards. You have 4 players who know each other. They've decided ahead of time that they want to play with each other. Is it okay to be flexible on the tier tolerances here? That's my question for you. Because you know that they're not going to be going after this player because they wanted to play with this person. This is a predetermined thing. Is there really a downside to giving them a really weak teammate if the match probability still falls within the 60-40 boundaries? My knee-jerk reaction is that it wouldn't be a problem at all. I think it would actually be good for that weaker player, but I'm going to think on that a little bit while I respond to Grant here. So if you have 2 players who combine for like 1650 and the other team is all 13. Oh, okay. So your question is, even though it meets the 60-40 check, is it okay to make that match just because there's such a large disparity between the top players on one team and then everybody else on the other team? Like, I think the real question is, would that game actually be a 60-40 probability? Like, are the top 2 players so good that no matter how weak their 2 teammates are, they're just going to win because they can carry one on each side? I think that's the question. But, sorry, wrong tab. But I think the answer to that has to be yes, because if we can't trust the 60-40 check, it means that there's an underlying problem with the skill score that we're using. Like you'd have to look at how that 60-40 was calculated, because if it's saying 60-40, it doesn't care how much the disparity is. It should be accounting for that already. So if it's not, and it's saying 60-40 when it's just never going to be a 60-40 chance, I think that issue is more on the calculation of the 60-40 than it is on allowing that match to exist in the first place. So I wouldn't say that that's I think it's a good thought. I don't think it's a barrier for this necessarily, because it would just be an unrelated problem that we would need to fix. That's a good thought. I'm just gonna make a note of that. Ensure that the skill disparity ensure that 2 top players can still be competitive against a mix of tier 1s. Good teammates. Did that summarize it? I.e., does the 60-40 check still hold true? I think that's good enough for that for me. So back to our tier tolerances for full teams here. Is it okay for a player who is weaker to be pulled up to a higher tier game if their teammates want them there? So it's a two-part question. It's yes, there's one side of it says, okay, the teammates want to have that player with them, so it's fine. The other side of it, is it okay for the other players that that player is on the opponent's team? I think as long as the 60-40 check holds and it's an accurate representation, I don't have a strong reason to say no. But my concern comes in kind of what Grant was just saying here. If you have, say, 3 players who are tier 6, and then they're like, hey, okay, then do you want to queue with us? Is the system going to match them accurately against anybody? Because I feel like those 3 tier 6 players would pull them down so low that maybe you're playing against a mixture of tier 2s and 3s. Okay, then just going to run the gambit on these people because he's just playing a different game at that level compared to these players at the bottom. So is it fair to the other team, even though the skill score says it's going to be fair? So I think it's going to be a similar point here. I think this is more of a problem with a top player playing down than it is with a weak player playing up. I don't think that players who are in tier 2 and 3 are going to care that there's a tier 5 player on their opponent's team, as long as, like, if they want to exploit that, that's their prerogative, and that's teaching that player to get better, and their teammates wanted that player there. So I don't think it's an issue. I feel like I'm missing something on this. I feel like I'm missing a key piece of this. It's going to tell me that I'm wrong, but so I think it's okay for a weak player to get pulled up. I don't think it's okay for a good player to get pulled down. So we'll talk about how to differentiate those two things in a moment here. Is it okay for a player who is stronger to be pulled down to a lower? Well, we'll get into that in a second, Grant. That's a good question. Let me just finish this thought real quick, and then I'll come back to that. So I think the answer to this is yes, and the answer to this is no. And we'll come back to this in a minute. So a really good question from Grant. Is the idea for these players to be in the existing ranked queue as duos, and do you have them with their own duo score, or do they use their current score as a duo? And I think that's a really important difference that we'd have to decide on, because you could make the point that 2 players who play really, really well together, maybe when they're on a team, they're just better than individually they would be, or conversely, maybe these 2 players are just garbage together and they never play well because their play styles don't mesh. So would you take their games where they're together and say this is their combined skill score when trying to decide if it's fair to put them against other people? Or would you say they just happen to both be on the same team for the sake of the calculation? The fact that they got there because they wanted to be on the same team is irrelevant. We're still trying to create a match with their individual skill scores. And then when the game ends, are you changing their individual skill scores, or are you saying no change because you chose to be together, or are you saying that it's a different change to their combined skill score in the process? I think that's a really good thing to figure out now. And that's independent from duo and team queue. I think that is skill score adjustments. And the question here, just to reiterate that, is do players who choose to play together have a new combined skill score, or do their games still count the same as if they had not decided to be on the same team? I think the easier version of that is to just keep them separate and let the joiner do what it does already. The question is it better to not do that? Would it create better matches? Would it be a more fun experience? That's where I really want to explore that side of it. Yeah, positions. I'm less concerned about positions because thankfully the current meta has progressed to a point where you should be able to play both sides of the map, especially for the players at the very top. Like, yeah, you might have a preferred position. You might be slightly better at one than the other, but most players are at least passable on both sides of the map. And those who aren't, overall, they're just not as good of a player. It's reflected in their skill score anyway. I don't love diving in to position dependent skill scores. I just feel like that gets messy because then you get the whole problem that the leagues have with like your position restrictions. And is this player actually better at offense? Or if they're D-restricted but they're an offender, are they actually really good for their team? Because every time they let the flag out, now they're on offense and it's a whole thing. Like, I just feel like anytime you try to let players decide what position they're going to be, it just creates friction that doesn't need to exist. And I feel like it's not worth trying to solve that for people. Like, if you're only good at one position, that's on you. Like, get better at the other one if you want to be playing at that level. That's kind of where I land on it, is the pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality on that one. But no, in seriousness, I don't know. I feel like it's not really worth addressing with this personally. Speak for yourself. I mean, I always prefer defense. That's always my thing. I will go offense if I need to, but if I get the choice, I'm going to play D. But even so, I feel like just, you got to figure it out at a certain point. Or if you're not going to figure it out, just accept that it's going to be reflected in your skill score as such. And then the other problem would be like the queuing thing. Like, do you have like a defense only queue, and then maybe like there's too many defenders queued, and then you have like not enough offenders queued, and then it's a whole, it's just, I feel like it's creating more problems than it's solving to try to explore that. So yeah, people with their partner, yeah, the answer could be good if it works, otherwise kick rocks. That's fair enough. If you wanted to both say you prefer defense, that's fine, but I can't promise anything. I think that's okay. And if you get to full team queuing, then obviously you have a lot more freedom to do what you want to do there. So I think that would be a wanted thing, but all right, okay, so okay, where am I? Sorry, I just got a text from a friend that I was not expecting. It threw me off. So 60-40, yes, no. Let's talk about yes and no here a little bit more, about why it's yes and no. Teammates expect them to be there. Opponents are not really impacted. Yeah. And this one, a top player will disproportionately, oh God, spelling. Thank you, Google. Disproportionately impact low tier games. And it might not, I mean, there might be a case where the skill score just would never let them meet the 60-40. I'm not sure. Functionally, how do you define being pulled up or down? Yeah, I think it would have to be our current tier tolerances, where it says that if any of your teammates are, oh, I see what you're saying. If it's like a tier 1 and a tier 2. Yeah, better example, a tier 1 and a tier 4, and then 2 tier 5s. The tier 4 can play down with the tier 5, but the tier 1 can't play down with the tier 5. But if you had a tier 1 and a tier 2 and a 4 and a 5, the 1 and the 2 can't play down with the 5, but now you're saying the 5 can play up with the 1 and the 2. So which, I guess you'd have to say find the average of the team, and if more players are moving above the average versus below, that decides if you're going up or down. Does that work? I don't know if that works. Because like you said, if the closer and closer you get, the harder and harder it would be to define it. But even that average doesn't work, because maybe you have, okay, you'd only look at the average if the players were outside of the tier tolerance. Because if it's like tier 1 through 3, who cares if you're going up or down? You're all eligible to be matched together. But if you're not eligible, let's write this down. If players are not eligible, eligible due to tier tolerances, take the average of the 4 players. Would it be average, or would it be, I don't know, what other metric could you use? I think it has to be average. Take the average of the 4 players and what am I trying to do with this? You're trying to see if there are more players above or below the average? That's dumb. What am I saying? Math done live, yeah, it's always a mess because I look like a moron on stream. Would it just be a quantity thing? So you take your 4 players, and you say you have the top 2 and the bottom 2. You're never going to have players with the exact same skill score. They're always going to be ranked. So take your top 2 ranked and your bottom 2 ranked, and then you do something with this. There's something to do with, is this player closer to, is the average of these 2 closer to the average of the 4? I don't, there's something there. I know it's there, but I can't pick it out. Nope, I don't know. This isn't going to come to me. Insert math here. Averages versus, I'm also thinking about, like, is it just like the mode? I don't know. If up, down. Okay, we're gonna hand wave that away because I don't want to sit here and just stutter at the screen for 20 minutes. Some stats grads on standby. Yeah, they'll figure it out. I'm gonna hand that off to somebody else who isn't on stream trying to figure this thing out. Oh boy. All right, so that, honestly, a pretty good summary there. It's not comprehensive yet, but I feel like that covers at least the conversation that we need to have. And that brings us to casual. So there are a whole host of other considerations with casual that I got into a little bit on Discord the other night. For ranked, am I saying trios don't bother? For ranked, I'm saying trios, it's close enough to duos that it's probably going to work the same way. So whatever. It might be a mixture of the two where you're looking at the... No. Yeah, it would be the same as duos, where if you're not eligible to match together because you're going to be getting a teammate you're not expecting or you don't know, so don't bother with it. I think we can do trios. I just don't think that we need to type out a whole thing because it's basically going to be exactly this on... So I'll just say duo plus trio. Yeah, what would trios do differently than duos? Yeah, okay, that's a fair point. I don't love, oh yeah, here are these three people on your team who are all on good terms, and then there's you, because then if they're like ganging up on the fourth player, yeah, that's actually a really solid point. Or maybe just duo, so it's not three people who know each other targeting the fourth. Yeah, all right, that'll come up later. Good, thank you. Casual. So we have a couple problems with casual. First being that open matchmaking is fine when the 8 players in that game can be balanced to some degree. It's not fine when a group of 4 can join in and just be good as a team, because you kind of have the worst of both worlds from before the ranked joiner and all that, where you, like, remember the games a couple of years ago where you would join in and it was you and like 3 other players who you knew were pretty good, and the other team was just a mess of some balls, maybe a couple of new players or something like that, and you would just flatten them. Like it would just be a 3-0 within like 30 seconds because nobody on the other team knew what was going on. It was funny when it happened occasionally because it was a random thing and it wasn't anything that was guaranteed to happen again. But if you have a group of 4 queuing casual, and say it's, I used this example last night, say it's like for the extreme example, it's a majors team that forgot to set up scrims. And they're like, oh, we'll just queue casual to get some games in. Like, they're going to mop the floor with everybody. Like, it's not going to be fun for anybody matched on the other team who'd signed up to play casual, and now they're getting matched against these players who have like frame perfect reaction times to everything. Like if this is your first game playing TagPro in casual and you get matched against that, you're gonna quit. Like, why would I play this game where I lost the game in 15 seconds when I didn't even know what a flag was yet? Like, I just feel like it's not really conducive to an enjoyable experience to allow that to happen. But I don't know how you can allow players to queue as a team and not open the possibility for that in the first place. Like, you would have to assess your casual matches before you even created them, and now you're kind of defeating the whole point of just queue up and go. So I think, and I had some time to think about this ahead of time, so I apologize for being a step ahead of the conversation, but I think you can allow duo queuing in casual and nothing more than that, just because the whole thing that was requested was that I would like to join games with my friends or with my friend and maybe show my friend the game for the first time, and I want to be on their team. That seems like a very relevant and benign use case where you can say, this is me, this is my friend who's new to the game, I would like to be on their team so that we can have fun together. That's pretty harmless. When that friend becomes 3 of your friends who are all very good at the game, I think it can become somewhat detrimental to the goal of casual. So I think my first reaction, and again, feel free to correct me, or if you're watching the recording later, shoot me a DM, but I think you would have to just keep it as duo, and you would say no to the team. Do not. So if you're with the duo, you would say do not break the pre-matched players up during the pre-game. I don't like how one pre has a dash and one doesn't. Let's do that. During the pre-game team shuffle, team balancing. Luckily, we do have a system already that takes a game with preset teams and it tries to find the best match for them. So we could still use that pretty easily. I think that system exists right now for casual games. If there is a player missing, so it's a 3v4, it will, instead of just finding the first person it can, it will put that 3v4 into the joiner and say who's the most fair sub to fill in within a certain wait time. So if everyone's been waiting the same amount of time, it'll take the player who is most fair to put into that spot. I think we can use that same function to keep those 2 players together and then balance the other 6 players around them to be as fair as possible. Yeah, so I think that's fine. slightly sad because for most teams it wouldn't be a huge problem. It just breaks at the upper ends. Yeah, it's hard because like the ideal use case, it would be just queue up with your friends and it's whatever. But we don't have enough players in the game to handle most cases there, unfortunately. If somebody comes up with a better way to approach that, I'm happy to hear it. But I don't see how we can allow it without also opening the possibility of creating a bit of a mess. Because even I used the extreme example of a majors team. That's probably never going to happen. But even like a novice team, you have 4 players in a voice channel who are coordinated and playing at a decently high level compared to some random public casual games. It's still not going to be great for the other side of that more often than not. So I could be swayed, but that's where I landed on it as of now. What else do we need to consider here? All this stuff about skill score tolerances, none of that's relevant for this. I guess with wait times, is anything relevant there? No, because they would have been waiting for the same amount of time if they're a duo. They would have joined together. So that's fine. What else? For the balancing, it would be the same thing as with ranked. I think you can just keep them as their individual skill scores. It'll go up or down, wins and losses. And that'll just go towards future balancing. I don't think we really need to do anything else with that, because the only other thing I can think of would be like low population hours. If they were the only 2 players online and they got put into a game together, they would just be on the same team, 2v0. But we don't allow games to be launched with fewer than 6 players anymore, so that's not even a factor anymore. So maybe with mini games, you could say don't place, or I guess if there are only 2 players, it's such an edge case, only 2 players in the match, they can be broken up. That's never gonna, like, whatever, who cares, like, it's fine. By default, if you're in a duo group playing casual, do you assume they want to be on the same team, or do you need a separate button from the current option where it treats you individually? That's an excellent point, because we do currently have the ability to play public games, and right now your team is going to be random. So I think you would need to have a little option here that says same team or different team. And the other part of that is that this allows up to 5 players. So I don't think this view would actually be possible. You would have to... How would you do that? Because if you had 5 players in a group, and they wanted to play casual together, like, this might be too much detail, so stop me if I'm losing track of the goal here. But if you had 5 players who want to play casual together, and you wanted one of them who's the newest player to always be on the same team as the most veteran player, we'll say, would you have this view where you say, okay, this is me, this is my new player friend, and then everybody else goes over in this other category, not with the red and blue headers necessarily, but just kind of these 2 are together, these 3 are also going to be in the game, and then the shuffle happens. Maybe a couple of those players do end up with you, but it's fine because that's what the skill score is determined, and that wouldn't be a problem necessarily. I think the harder part is just how do you present that in a non-confusing way. Can you link or buddy with a player somehow under the menu you get when you click on them as a group leader currently? So you're saying if I'm here, maybe I have a... Here, it's easier if I just have another ball. Say, okay, this is my new friend. They just joined TagPro. I would like them to be on my team. You're saying, can I click on this and have like make buddy or whatever you want to get, make teammate for casual, kind of something to that effect. Maybe. I don't know if that's the clearest way to put it, but what I said wasn't very clear either. So you'd want... So I'm thinking at the same time about that ranked thing where we're saying play private games, play public games. You're replacing the play public games with play casual and play ranked. Do you get even more granular and say, no, I don't think so. I think you say play public games or play casual games. We're pretending this says casual. I think you would just have to say preset teams or something like that. You need a little toggle here that would just change this box and say, okay, these two are together. Because if you had all 5 players, just to go with what Grant was saying, if you had all 5 here, and this was only done by button, and you say buddy with player or whatever, it would need to be short, first of all. How do you summarize that in 2 words? Make buddy, select teammate. That might be too many characters already. Like, how do you display that they're on the same team as you after you've closed that window is where I'm going with that. Like, is there like a little icon showing the two of them together? I don't know if there's really a clear team up. I like team up. Team up's good. Full group making 2 pairs. Yeah, you'd have to put like the 2 of you together, then the 2 of them together. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Like, do you allow more than 1 pairing? That gets messy really quickly, doesn't it? Because the other option you have is you don't allow teaming up unless you only have 2 players. And then you say, switch to team view. It just keeps the same everything, but it only allows 2 players into this box, and then the other 3 just get kicked to waiting, and they would have to make their own group. But then it's like, you all wanted to play together, so that's kind of a bummer now that you can't all be in the same lobby. So we'll write down our thoughts, and then this could be a steer code discussion later. So UI, when selecting play casual, offer options. I don't know why I'm nesting so many things, whatever. So first one is offer drop down team up button to pair a. Well, the problem with that too is now only the group leader can be paired with that person now. Like, what if you didn't want the group leader to be paired with that player? Maybe the best player in the group isn't the group leader, and you're trying to put them with somebody else. I don't know if that works. I'll still write it down, but do non-group leaders have any menu there? Yes, non-group leaders have the apply personal mute button, if I'm not mistaken. Let me confirm that. Yeah, they can apply mute and then cancel. That's all they have access to. Display. I don't know, buddy view, team up view. In the upper right corner, which would be kind of like over here, like team up view or something like that, to separate 2 slots from the other 3 slots. Players in the 2 slots will be on the same team. The others will be in the same game, but can end up on either team. And then for here, teamed up players will be on the same team. The others will be in the same game, but can end up on either team. And then the third option was button for team up only allows 2 players into the playing public games section. Others would need to make their own group. And this one's the least preferred, but easiest probably. Unfortunately. Okay, so that's 3 options. We'll talk about those later as a steering co. Does anybody have any rebuttals to my no on the team? I feel like I don't really have any other options here. And just for those who are just joining us, for team, we're saying no for casual because you just have a problem of 4 players who should not be together because they're just too good for the casual lobby, just stomping people game after game because they're always in the same team, which for ranked is fine because the players who get into the match are decided ahead of time, so you know it's going to be a fair matchup according to the skill scores. For casual, it's open, so it's just fine in the first 4 players it can, tossing them in, and that could not be a fair matchup, and more often than not might not be a fair matchup. So unless you can just throw them in the joiner and then only make the game if the other team, yeah, so that's kind of the problem, is you could do that, but then now you're ranked. Yeah. So yeah. Yep. If they want to play together as a full team, they can queue ranked, and that's fine because if there's a match for them, they'll make it. If not, there won't be. Other considerations. Yeah, they can start a pickup game. Other considerations, though. If full team queuing is offered for ranked, can the team enter the casual joiner as a non-team? Like, do you let those 4 players still get into casual games while they wait for a full team queue? I would think probably. I don't see any harm in that because it would work the same way that ranked does right now, where if the game happens, they get pulled out. That's fine. Once that's fixed and working properly. Right now it'd be a bit of a mess, but I would think they can. Yeah, it'd be handled the same as the current casual IU8 option. Yeah, so yeah, just like any public games group. Playing public games right now. Okay, that's good. For the duo, probably the same thing. I don't think that has to be spelled out differently. So I can probably just make this a main point. That looks good to me. I'm going to say it's not worth trying to figure out if the duo team... Well, if you're a duo for ranked, can you also queue as a duo for casual? Or do we just say it's casual? Because you can't have the team, obviously, as a team. But could the team select like a duo from their team? I feel like it's just too much of an edge case to worry about right now. The duo to a duo, I could probably see a case for that. A ranked duo can also be a casual duo. Don't bother handling duos out of full ranked teams. That's my personal preference there. Okay. What else do we need to think about? I'm thinking about the leaderboard right now. If the skill score adjustments, I don't think it's really a problem. Yeah, I don't think that's really a problem. I mean, you might get some pushback if there are like top players always playing as a duo and they like shoot to the top because they're just good together. If they're in like a voice channel, but who's that really hurting? Like they're playing together, they're playing well, and they're winning games. But in theory, they're fair games with the ranked system. And if their skill score is going up, it's because they play well together. That just means that the matches are going to be balanced differently, so they get worse teammates and they play against better players, so it stays even. I feel like that kind of self-corrects. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. I might get a clown for that in the future, but remove trio or just add trio. Yeah, I think I'm just going to remove trio. Yeah, okay. As long as in theory fair games are actually fair games fixes itself, yeah. So that's the kind of thing that if we add it in and it's just ridiculously unfair, I guess we'd have to revisit, but I don't think it's a problem. That could actually be a good precursor to integrating voice channels in ranked, where if we start with duos, now players at the top are used to talking with a partner, and now we say, okay, now everybody can talk, and that's fine. I mean, that comes with a whole host of other considerations in terms of moderating voice channels and all that stuff that I don't want to talk about right now, but I'm not opposed to voice channels if we can find a way to get that to happen. But I think duos would be a good kind of ramp into that, as opposed to going from nothing to everything. And some players do already sit in like a TPM lounge voice channel, I think, but I don't think we need to worry about that too much here. So anything else with this spec? I feel like this is pretty straightforward. This is more of a complicated back-end one than it is a complicated front-end one. Matchmaking. Yeah, I think I'm happy with this. So, success. I'm going to wrap it up then. So, other things, I was going to make a form. I forgot to make it, so I'll make this next week. I want to make sure that people have the chance to ask questions if they have them in a comfortable way. So I'm going to be creating a form. I'll put it up on stream next week probably. Basically just anonymous questions kind of thing. If you have anything you'd like me to talk about on stream, or you have any general questions for the development team, you can toss them in there and I'll answer anything that comes in each week. I am going to start posting these VODs to Reddit as suggested by Nabby. He posted a very cool, I don't know if anyone saw this, summary of the stream that was able to do with a GPT kind of thing. So that was pretty cool, just kind of summarizing everything we talked about, the timestamps for it. So I'm going to throw these up on Reddit. Hopefully we can get some more eyes on it and get some more collaboration in here on these, and go from there. So that's all I got for you guys. Like always, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message, and otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you later.